In theory, authoritarian regimes stifle innovation and lead to decay. In practice, modern China operates on an entirely different timeline. The physical landscape looks like a render of the year 2050. Heavy robotic integration, elevated highways without a single pothole, and towering infrastructure built at a scale that dwarfs Western financial hubs. Compare this physical reality with the daily friction of a developing democracy, where basic infrastructure projects stall in political gridlock and new roads deteriorate rapidly due to systemic corruption. This forces an uncomfortable question. How does a nation with absolute authoritarian control, strict censorship, and zero political opposition manage to execute an economic leap of this magnitude? The wealth of the People's Republic is not an unexplainable miracle. It is the direct result of three highly effective, heavily enforced systems that force us to weigh the absolute value of progress against the price required to achieve it. The first engine of this growth is a complete monopoly on policy. While local elections exist in China, they function entirely within a single-party authoritarian regime. There is no opposition. The political structure operates as a massive five-tiered pyramid. Citizens elect 2.5 million local leaders, but the party dictates the ballot. As the hierarchy filters upward, all real policy power concentrates into a 21-member Politburo, overseen by Xi Jinping. Thousands of delegates gather annually for the National Congress. There is no debate. There are no competing factions or filibusters. The assembly exists solely to sign off on decisions the Politburo has already finalized. Democracies are governed by the friction of five-year election cycles, forcing politicians to prioritize short-term popularity over difficult reforms. The Chinese state plans in 30-year cycles. When the state decided in the mid-2000s to blanket the country in high-speed rail, there were no environmental blockades or localized funding disputes. State banks were ordered to approve the loans. Within 15 years, they built over 45,000 kilometers of elevated track, roughly two-thirds of the entire world's high-speed rail network. At a micro level, this lack of friction allows for shocking speed. During the COVID outbreak in Wuhan, the state mobilized resources to construct a 1,000-bed modular hospital from the dirt up. It took exactly 10 days. Centralizing power eliminates the bureaucratic gridlock that plagues democratic development. The structural trade-off is that citizens forfeit entirely the ability to influence what happens in their own neighborhoods. The second engine is the strategic deployment of capital. 50 years ago, China faced extreme poverty, mass unemployment, and starvation. That trajectory shifted in 1978 when Deng Xiaoping opened the country's doors to foreign trade. By the time China officially joined the World Trade Organization in 2001, global corporations had realized the extreme cost advantage of Chinese labor, and the nation rapidly absorbed global manufacturing. China engineered its growth through extreme clustering, transforming entire cities into hyper-specialized manufacturing hubs. One city focuses exclusively on furniture, another produces only microchips, and a single town handles 60% of the world's buttons. If a company wants to build a strategic facility, the state provides a four-step framework. Local officials handle all land acquisition without delay. They slash corporate tax rates and subsidize rent. The local government acts as the primary venture capitalist, funding the build. Finally, they force hundreds of factories to compete fiercely for contracts, ensuring maximum efficiency. While democratic nations often operate as passive consumer markets, handing over their populations to foreign brands for free, China leverages its sheer size. If a foreign brand wants access to Chinese consumers, they are strictly mandated to manufacture locally and share their technology. The state owns every square inch of land in the country. By leasing it back to private enterprise under highly specific conditions, the government dictates the terms of global trade to extract wealth and intellectual property for its own long-term benefit. The third engine is the human cost of this efficiency. Despite flying a flag displaying the hammer and sickle, the universal symbol of worker empowerment, independent labor unions are entirely banned in China. The state extracts national prosperity through a grueling labor standard known as the 996 culture. Workers are expected to be on the factory floor or in the office from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. In 2007, just days before the launch of the first iPhone, Steve Jobs noticed his prototype had keys scratching the plastic screen in his pocket. He demanded an immediate shift to a scratch-proof glass screen. When the glass shipment arrived at a Chinese facility at midnight, foremen woke 8,000 sleeping workers from their dormitories. They handed them a cup of tea and a biscuit. Within 30 minutes, an impromptu 12-hour shift began. In 96 hours, that factory was assembling over 10,000 glass screens a day. There is no legal mechanism to refuse. Workers cannot organize a strike. They cannot post videos of their living conditions online because the state internet firewall prevents localized grievances from generating global outrage. The robotics, the bullet trains, and the towering skylines are heavily subsidized by an uncomplaining, deeply controlled working class. It is a level of forced human sacrifice that democratic nations are legally and ethically prohibited from demanding. This reality poses a dilemma for developing democracies. Indian independence leader Subhas Chandra Bose controversially argued that after centuries of colonial extraction, a fractured nation might require 20 years of strict central dictatorship to lay a hardened economic foundation before a democracy could safely function. Consider the vulnerability of the democratic model through a simple analogy. Imagine sitting on a commercial flight and being asked to vote for the pilot. Pilot A promises strict safety regulations, a simple, zero-frill service to keep everyone alive. Pilot B promises free business class upgrades and open access to the liquor cabinet. A highly educated voter might choose Pilot A, but a massive voting bloc will inevitably choose Pilot B, prioritizing short-term gratification over long-term safety, placing a populace with zero technical competence at the controls. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar warned of this exact vulnerability. When an electorate votes without deep understanding of policy, the democratic process deteriorates into a meaningless popularity contest. Contrast this with the Chinese state's ruthless obsession with results. To secure top-tier placements in the Olympics, they identify children with physical aptitudes, isolate them in state-funded training camps, and relentlessly drill them. Local leaders are heavily financially rewarded for bringing home a medal and swiftly removed for failing to deliver. So the thought experiment remains. If a government offered you a flawless city with world-class infrastructure, high-paying manufacturing hubs, and absolute public safety, but required you to accept total censorship, high-level corruption, and zero political voice in return, would you take the deal? We can admire the engineering of a bullet train and the logistics of a 10-day hospital, but we have to acknowledge the price tag attached to them. The choice is between the messy, gridlocked friction of freedom or prosperity locked permanently inside a cage.